March 27th, 1977. A small airport on a Spanish island in the Atlantic. Two Boeing 747s, among the largest passenger aircraft ever built, are about to collide head-on, on the ground, in thick fog. 583 people will die. It remains, to this day, the deadliest accident in aviation history. This is the story of how it happened, and how almost every safeguard built to prevent it failed at the same time. To understand what happened at Tenerife, you have to understand why two jumbo jets were even there in the first place. Neither plane was supposed to land at Los Rodeos Airport. Pan Am Flight 1736 and KLM Flight 4805 were both scheduled to land at Gran Canaria Airport on the neighboring island. But earlier that day, a bomb planted by a separatist group exploded in the terminal at Gran Canaria. No one was killed, but the airport was shut down while authorities checked for a second device. Every flight bound for Gran Canaria was diverted. Within hours, Los Rodeos, a small regional airport never designed for this kind of traffic, was packed with aircraft it didn't have space for. Planes were parked along the only taxiway.
By late afternoon, Gran Canaria reopened. But now, the planes stuck at Los Rodeos faced a new problem: fog. Los Rodeos sits at high elevation, and cloud cover there can roll in and reduce visibility to almost nothing within minutes. That's exactly what started happening as the two 747s prepared to leave. Because the taxiway was blocked by parked aircraft, air traffic control gave both planes an unusual instruction: taxi down the actual runway itself, then turn around at the end and line up for takeoff. KLM 4805 would taxi to the far end, turn 180 degrees, and wait. Pan Am 1736 would follow behind it, but exit the runway onto the taxiway partway down, clearing the way for KLM to take off. On paper, this worked. In the fog that was now settling over the runway, visibility dropped to under 500 meters. Neither crew could see the other plane. And critically, neither plane could be seen by the control tower either.
This is where the accident stopped being about fog and traffic and became about a chain of small miscommunications. The KLM captain, Jacob Van Zanten, was one of the airline's most senior and respected pilots. He was even the face of KLM's safety training films. But that same afternoon, he was also under pressure. If his flight was delayed much longer, his crew would run out of legally permitted flight hours, forcing a costly overnight stay. At the end of the runway, KLM 4805 turned around. Van Zanten began advancing the throttle for takeoff, before receiving full takeoff clearance from the tower. His co-pilot radioed air traffic control, reporting they were now at takeoff. The tower responded, "Stand by for takeoff. I will call you." Not a clearance to actually begin the roll. At nearly the same moment, Pan Am's crew radioed that they were still taxiing down the runway. Both transmissions were sent at almost the same time. They overlapped, creating a brief burst of interference on the radio. KLM's cockpit heard only a fragment of the Pan Am transmission. The critical words, "We are still taxiing down the runway," never reached them clearly. The tower asked Pan Am to confirm they had cleared the runway. Pan Am responded, "Okay, we'll report when we're clear," a transmission KLM's cockpit could actually hear. Seconds later, KLM's flight engineer asked, "Is he not clear then?" Van Zanten asked him to repeat it. The engineer asked again, "Is he not clear, that Pan American?" Van Zanten replied firmly, "Oh yes," and the takeoff continued. Visibility was now so poor that Pan Am's crew didn't see KLM's landing lights emerging from the fog until seconds before impact. They pushed their throttles forward, trying to turn off the runway to avoid the collision. It wasn't enough. KLM's plane was lifting off the ground when it struck Pan Am's fuselage. The impact tore through the upper section of the Pan Am aircraft. KLM's plane, already damaged, slammed back onto the runway and slid for several hundred meters before erupting into flames. All 248 people aboard the KLM flight died. On Pan Am's aircraft, 335 of the 396 passengers and crew were killed. Though, remarkably, some passengers near the front of the plane survived.
escaping through the gap torn open by the collision before fire engulfed the wreckage. In total, 583 people lost their lives. It remains the deadliest single accident in commercial aviation history.
The investigation that followed reshaped aviation safety procedures worldwide. Standard phraseology was introduced for air traffic communication, specifically to eliminate ambiguity. The word takeoff is now used only when a plane is actually cleared to take off. At every other point, controllers say departure instead, specifically to prevent the kind of confusion that happened that day. Cockpit resource management, a system that trains co-pilots and flight engineers to challenge a captain's decision if something seems wrong, became standard training across the industry. Investigators found that KLM's flight engineer had doubts about whether the runway was clear. In the cockpit culture of the time, junior crew members were far less likely to challenge a senior captain. That changed permanently after Tenerife. Today, runway incursions are tracked, alarmed, and cross-checked by multiple automated systems that didn't exist in 1977. Systems that exist, in large part, because of what happened on that runway in the fog.
The Tenerife disaster wasn't caused by one mistake. It was caused by a chain of ordinary, understandable decisions. A bomb threat, fog, a delay, a moment of radio interference that lined up in exactly the wrong way, at exactly the wrong time. Almost every rule in modern aviation communication exists because of a moment like this one. A moment when someone, somewhere, didn't have the information they needed to stop in time. If you want to understand how the modern safety net was built, one disaster at a time, subscribe. We'll be back next week with another investigation.